Friends and neighbors, James Gorden Freeze is in the studio with me this morning. Good morning, buddy.
Good morning.
Hey, thank you so much for coming. Really,
Well, thank you for the invitation.
You know, you've been a great friend for many, many years, all the way back to high school days.
We go way back.
You know, honestly, I think the first memory I have of you, I was at E.O. Kaufman.
Okay.
And they had some kind of event, and you and a group of your fellow friends and musicians were playing. And they had a room back
I remember
there.
that.
Do you remember this?
I
Do you remember
do.
that they had a room back there,
Mm-hmm.
and y'all were playing music?
Yeah.
That's my first memory of you, I think.
Yeah, it was me and Andy White.
Well, wait a minute. That's
Some of
not
those
true.
guys. No,
That's
you
not
got to
true.
tell the
That's
new
not true.
prospect story.
That's not true. I've had memories of you before that, but that's one of my early memories of you.
Right.
Was back then, and that's when I think you'd taken up the bass at that point.
Yeah. Well, I was playing keyboard on that.
Or
in
you
that
play
gig.
keyboard?
Yeah,
Okay.
and-
Gosh, that's a long time ago for me to remember.
yeah. Yeah, because I can tell you that about the year, I think it was in '76. Because
Yep.
it was me and Andy White.
Yeah.
Wayne Lewis was playing bass with us.
Oh, okay, okay.
Phil Watson was in that band, and a guy named Mike Allen from Columbia was
Yeah.
playing drums and singing
Yeah.
Don Henley's part, because we were
Yeah,
doing Eagles
y'all were
music.
doing Eagles stuff.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, big time, big time.
Wow.
Well, you know, we're going to get to all that in the music career and all that kind of stuff, but let me make sure that things are working. I think they are. Yeah, they're working like they're supposed to. So far, so good.
Cool.
If you do see me turn and check the board, I have to make sure that all the buttons are pushed like they're supposed to be. So,
Yeah.
Anyway. But again, thank you for being here. James Gorden Freeze, everybody. And, of course, not an unfamiliar name to a lot of us here at all, and had a tremendous career in music. And I told you one time this. You and I have visited many times.
Yeah.
And I told you that you're one of the few people I know that started doing what he loved doing and never quit.
Never stopped.
Just
no.
did that one thing and just headed at it.
Yeah.
But I want to go back. I want to find out stuff maybe that I don't know so much about. I know a lot about you.
You do.
But because you and I have spent some time together, you know, that kind of thing. And but before I want to find out about your folks and go way
Okay.
back. Your mom and dad, of course, were here in Lawrenceburg.
Right.
Mr. I can't think of his name.
Clinton Freeze.
Clinton Freeze. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Arthur
and,
Clinton
And your
Freeze.
mom's name was
Helen.
Helen and Clinton Freeze. And a lot of you will know and remember Mr. Freeze from him being the butcher.
Yeah, at
at
H.G.
H.G.
Hills.
That's my first memories of
Yeah.
him at all.
Right.
Was he a native Lawrence County?
No,
Was-
he's from Green Hill, Alabama.
Okay, well, tell us his story just a little bit,
All right.
as much as you know.
He came from Green Hill, and my mother was from St. Joe, Iron
Okay.
City originally, and then they moved to St. Joe. And
What
he became best friends with my mother's brother, Hansard Shelton. She was a Shelton
Okay.
from there. Walter Shelton, that was there in St. Joe, was her brother. It
Okay.
was- a lot of people will remember down there. And their daughter, Kathy, married Kenneth Weathers, and all the Weathers is there.
Oh, okay.
Kathy Weathers. She was a Shelton. But no, Dad met her, and they married around 48, I believe it was.
Do you know how they met, or how the story behind all that?
Yeah, through her brother,
Okay.
my uncle Hansard Shelton, who carried the mail down there in that area in Keller,
Okay.
in St. Joe area.
Okay.
And well, St. Joe still had a post office at that time, you know, before it all
Right.
moved to Keller.
Right.
And so, but that's how they met. They were friends, and so.
Well, the
and
early
they
life,
married.
the early and young life of your mom and dad in particular here first.
Yeah.
Do you know what he did? You know what he was doing as a young man?
Well, they were farmers down
Okay,
there.
so they were farming.
Yeah, they didn't even realize this. I related to what Robert Pulley was telling you last week about. I asked him, I said, did you guys even know what the going through the Depression was? And he said, no, we didn't, because we were, you know, we had food to eat. We was
Just farming.
Farming potatoes and things.
Yeah.
He said, we just didn't know it. Well, then when the rentals, they came in, and the building of Wilson Dam.
Yeah.
My grandfather had something to do with that. And then they went to work at Reynolds. And my father tried that. Now, all his brothers and did factory work, and he couldn't do that.
That's what I was going to ask you. Did he have brothers and sisters?
Yes,
Your dad?
and of course they've all passed now. One brother went on to Nashville to work for the Ford glass plant, but Dad could not do the factory thing. He had a personality; he needed to be in front of people.
Yeah,
and so he came to Lawrenceburg and worked. You know where Weathers Brothers Music was? That's the original H.G. Hill store.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any store
I think I've heard that.
Any store you see with a corner entrance, even in the Alabama area, was owned by H.G. Hill in Nashville.
Okay.
And a lot of those are gone now. Even the ones in Nashville had that same entrance, and Dad used to show them to me, and some of them became restaurants and so forth.
Oh, really?
So
That's interesting.
So Mr. H.G. Hill Jr. himself, because that company goes back to the 1800s, drove down the big new Lincoln, smoking a big cigar and dressed up. And I'm trying to think who his first name was Fred, but I can't think of his last name, that owned the store, that managed the store, didn't own it. And Dad was just working in the store for him. So Mr. Hill said, why? Said, you're a good worker here, and Mr. Fred here likes you. Said, how would you like to be a manager, a meat market manager and a butcher? Could you handle that if I put that in the store? He said, and I'm going to build a new store right up the street.
Oh, really?
They did in 1950.
Okay.
Built that new
Okay.
H.G. Hill store, which is not there anymore.
Right.
It's a parking lot.
Oh, I remember it. But
You
yeah.
remember the store?
Oh, yeah.
And sure enough, he said, I'll take you to Nashville, and I'll put you up in a hotel. You'll work in every H.G. Hill store I have up there, and I will teach you how to run a meat market.
Oh, wow,
And
really?
That's how that happened. And he put him in that. And in those days,
Now, were your mom and dad married yet at this
they was
point?
married.
Okay.
In '48, and they were living behind the Cumberland Presbyterian Church. We lived in a little duplex there for about a year when I was born.
Okay.
But this is all happening before I was born.
Sure.
And so he did that, went to Nashville, came back here and worked there, and that meat market became 60% of that business.
Really?
It was always a 60-40 thing. And so it was a big part of that H.G. Hill store, Then it later, Lloyd Campbell bought it, and it became Campbell's Food Tank.
Right, I remember.
And
Now,
so
he stayed there during that,
Dad
too?
stayed there and retired there with
I
him.
barely, I guess, remember it being H.G. Hill's. It was Campbell's, I guess, most of the time
When
I
you
started
knew.
growing up,
Yeah.
all that. But I do remember, I think, it being the H.G. Hill's.
Yeah, it stayed H.G. Hill's till some part of the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it did.
Really?
Yeah, it did. It stayed there a lot longer than you would think. And then
That doesn't seem right.
It
But I guess you're
early
right.
80s in that period or in the middle part of it.
So it was H.G. Hill's the whole time, yeah.
Lloyd Campbell bought it and,
Okay. All right.
took it and
Well, that's the interesting part of that is him having to go to all the stores.
yeah. And
So-
he worked under every one of the major butchers and managers in Nashville, so he could learn that business. See, and
You know,
that's
that
why
may
he
be-
was so good at it here.
That may be kind of a lost art.
Well, it is now. It's
mean,
it's almost gone. To know your local butcher is.
Yeah, I mean, it's just not.
Yeah.
It's
Dad
just not
would
done
just-
that way anymore.
I know when Mr. Bob Boston was still there, or no, Bill Boston was living.
Yes.
He could call Dad, I want so many steaks on Friday. He said, I'll have them for you, and they'll be ready, and so
Yeah.
forth. And he did that for everybody, and that is a lost art. Now, a lot of people tried to hire him because he was so good at that. In Nashville, every time they'd open a new H.G. Hill store, they would offer him the job, and Mother didn't want to move to Nashville.
Oh, I don't blame her.
So, and things might have changed, made my gig a little harder, trying to get into the music business, but because I was trying to do that then, even early on. But anyway,
Now, did your mom?
So she did.
Did your mom work anywhere? Or?
My mom was a person who was sick most of her life.
Oh.
I didn't know her to be. She had about
I don't think I
17.
realized that.
She had cancer, went through cancer about 3 or 4 times.
Oh my! I don't think I knew that, James.
I didn't know her to be a well person.
Okay.
A lot, but she was good at covering it up.
Yeah.
But and going on with life,
Sure,
you know, and
sure.
supporting me and so forth, because I was the only child. But mother did not hold down a job. She stayed at home and took care of me, and my grandmother lived with us too.
Oh, really?
And so that was.
Now, your
and she
grandmother
helped
owned-
raise me because my mother was in the hospital
Was
a
it
lot.
your grandmother on your mother's side? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
On
So her
side.
mother. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's interesting. Of course, that's one of those things I didn't know about.
Yeah.
You know, didn't know about you. Even
Well,
though
I know I would have been 10 years old in 1967. They set me down and gave me the statistics that, and basically said your mother probably won't
Oh, wow.
live. You know.
Wow.
And but she told her oncologist in Nashville. She said, "I'll be here when you're gone."
How about
she
that?
had that kind of faith, and
Yeah.
it happened.
How about that?
She outlived her own
Well,
cancer
bless
doctor.
her. Yeah, well, amen to that. That's awesome. You know, those doctors aren't in charge.
No.
You know,
And she told me
God's in charge.
God's in charge.
That's right.
And she claimed healing and was healed. I witnessed it several times, and God allowed me to have her for a long time. And then the 4th time it was inoperable,
Yeah.
and then we lost her in '99.
In '99,
when she passed away.
Wow, wow. So she did very well to have battled
Yes.
that kind of illness.
Absolutely.
Did
Because
very
she had
well.
it from the '50s on.
Well, how about that?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, what a great testimony.
It is.
What a great
Fantastic.
now. What was church life for the Freeze family? Because it obviously was
Okay,
there.
this is interesting.
Yeah.
All right. My grandfather, who I never met, was a preacher,
Okay.
and he was a Cumberland Presbyterian
Now,
preacher.
who's
And on mother's side.
On your mother's side,
Yeah,
okay.
he was a Shelton.
Shelton?
And he was a circuit riding preacher, and I've read about him. He's an interesting
Okay.
individual. Never knew either one of my grandfathers. They both passed away early.
Uh-huh.
And he passed away in the 40s. But anyway, we went to the Cumberland Presbyterian Church down here, you know, at the foot of the hill off the square there. One of the oldest churches, I guess, in the county. And so I'm trying to get in the playing music.
Yes.
My folks were into Southern gospel and quartet people.
Yeah.
And I was named after James Blackwood of the Blackwood Brothers.
Okay.
Because my mother was a vice president of their fan club in the 50s.
Oh my goodness.
And
Okay.
they were a big deal on
So
the radio.
This is how you're interested in
That's
music.
how it came.
Okay.
Yeah. And we would go to the quartet conventions in Memphis. That was our vacation. I never saw Florida or a beach till I started touring.
Yeah.
We went to Memphis to the quartet convention every year. And so that's what happened. And I took some piano lessons when I was 5 years old and hated it. I was too young.
Do you remember who you took
Yeah,
from?
I took from Miss Alford. Great teacher. You know, she's kin to the great James D. Walbert.
Oh, okay.
Bobby Alford's
Yeah,
sister.
yeah.
Lived right up the street from me on Fair Avenue. So I'd walk up there and see I was sitting there. I'd say, Miss Alford, how does that go again? I said, play that for me. And she'd play, and then I'd play it back.
Okay.
So she figured out right quick what I was doing. You know,
Yeah.
I had an ear.
Sure.
But I didn't want to read.
You didn't want to learn the hard
No.
stuff. You just wanted to play.
Right. But I was too young to be doing that. And so finally, later on, I did learn from another teacher.
Yes.
But so that's what pushed me to play drums right off the bat.
Oh, okay.
You know, which ties in with the church thing. You know, Cumberland Presbyterian Church didn't have drummers, you know.
No.
Guitar pickers or any of that.
No.
Well, I mean, we had the pipe organ and the
Yeah.
choir and the whole thing, and it was cool.
You just couldn't envision a band up there.
No. So my mother took it on herself to decide that the family was going to have to change churches.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so I'm about 9 or 10 years old. She says, there's a new church down here on the hill before you get, you know, to where the new hospital is. It wasn't there at that time.
Yeah.
But she said it's called the First Assembly of God Church. She
Okay.
said, now, and, you know, and the Blackwood brothers and Elvis and all these people were Assembly of God people. So
And they have a band.
they have music. They're rocking and rolling. And so she said, we're going to go down there and see what what's going on. They've got a new pastor.
Yeah.
They're from Oklahoma, and they're Cherokee Indians.
Oh, really?
Steve and Veda Allen, beautiful people.
I don't think I.
They lived here in the '60s and
think I knew
pastored
that.
the church. Good-looking folks, and both could absolutely play either organ or piano.
Okay.
To the max.
Okay.
By the second week we were going to church there, my drums were set up in the church and I was playing.
Oh my!
It
goodness.
happened that quick.
Okay. Now, how old were you then?
Then I was 10.
10 years old.
Yeah, but I'd already been playing. So I didn't start in gospel music. I started in country music here in Lawrenceburg with Mike Yerby's band.
Well, you're gonna have to back up.
We had
just
to
a
back
minute.
up 2
You
years.
have to back up just a minute.
So that's where I learned, I was doing drums and stuff. And
Okay.
Mother was playing the piano one day. It's a funny story.
Yeah.
Mother's playing piano one day, and we had wind air conditioner,
Yes.
big metal thing come out, and I had a pair of drumsticks. I think it's from a toy set of drums.
Yeah.
And I was keeping time with her while she's playing. Man, well, she calls Dad down at H.G. Hills, and all you'd have to do is you just say, "I'd like to speak to Freeze in the meat department."
Right.
So he answers the phone.
Right.
She says, "Look, Clinton, listen to this." Well, it sounded like a racket over the phone. I'm beating on an air conditioner while she's playing the piano. He said, "Well, Helen, I don't understand. It just sounds like what are y'all hammering on in there? That kind of thing." And she said, "No, it's James Gorden. He's playing the drum. He's got rhythm. I think we need to get him a
He's
set
got
of drums.
rhythm."
He's playing." She knew that I was playing something correct, she thought.
Right.
And as it turned out, she was right.
And you were what, 8 or 9?
I was probably 8 then.
8 years.
And then
old.
she heard that there was a band in town called the Volunteers, and yeah, and you can
Really?
yes, and it was Mike Yerby. Let's see Rick. I'm trying to think who else was in that band that you would know.
Oh gosh.
Oh, later it was Mickey Cruz.
Okay, yeah.
Was in it, and
Yeah.
Ronnie McLaren was in it also.
Oh, yeah.
Our first bass player was Butch White.
Names that I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, we played around here, Crawfish Valley Community Center. We played what's called the Pepper Plant on Buffalo
Oh
Road.
yeah, the Pepper Plant.
We'd play there on
Oh,
Saturday
yeah.
nights and just play wherever we could play. And we even played at E.O. Kaufman.
Now, you
which
had a set of drums.
I
at
had a
that-
set of drums, but then.
Well, time out just a minute because
All
I
right.
know a little bit. I know a little bit about maybe from one of the stories you've told me in the past is your first drum. Mm-hmm. The first snare drum.
Yeah. Well, my first snare drum was just a toy thing.
I understand that. I understand that.
Just beat it to
But your
death,
dad bought you a really that you
Yeah,
still
I had
have.
68. I still have.
You still have it,
He went into Mr. Charlie Campbell, at Campbell's Music on 4th Street.
right?
And I already had a pretty decent set of drums.
Yes.
But I needed a really good snare drum because most of the stuff we were doing in Nashville
Yeah.
was just on snare.
Right. Right. Hang on just a second.
Go right ahead.
I want you to finish that story.
All right.
I think somebody wants to talk to us and you, okay? Hey, good morning. You're with us.
Morning. How are you, Jeff?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm listening. This is Jimmy Ann. I'm listening to you and James Gorden, and he said he played at the Pepper Plant. And
Yes.
Bill has been looking. I don't know if he's got any pictures or not, but Bill has been looking forever for some pictures of when the Pepper Plant was kind of like a dance hall where there were bands there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That
So if
would
you
be
got
awesome.
any pictures, James Gorden, bring them over to Rent Right to Bill someday.
I will try. I don't think we have anything, but I think Mike Yerby, if anybody has anything, Mike will, because his mother was so instrumental in booking the band and
Yeah.
all that sort of
We'll
thing.
put out a search, Jimmy Ann.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank y'all. I'm going to
Thank
keep
you.
listening.
All right,
Okay.
Very good. Jimmy
Okay.
Ann over there at Rent Right. Of course, that's where the old paper plant was.
That's where it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the snare drum.
All right. So Dad goes in. Now, my dad didn't have any musical talent whatsoever. But now he knew if I was going to do anything, I was going to have good gear, good equipment, So he goes in to see Mr. Campbell one day. And if you remember Charlie, he was a character. And so he says, Charlie, my son needs the best snare drum made. He says, well, Clinton says it's going to be a Rogers snare drum. And he had it. He says, I don't have one here. I'll have to order it out of California.
Yeah.
He opened up a Rogers
Yeah.
catalog and said it's called a Dynasonic
Yeah.
snare, and it's the best snare drum built right. He said, well, what does that thing cost? And I don't remember it. It was expensive
Yeah.
for my dad to have
Yeah.
to pay for it.
I have no clue.
I
what
have
it
no
might have been.
clue, and it could have been $150, $200, which would have been a lot for a snare drum back in that day.
Yeah, by far.
And plus, you had to buy a stand for it, and he bought the best stand that Rogers made for it too. Well, it came in a couple of weeks, and I still have that drum to this day.
That's
and
awesome.
I take care of it, and it sounds incredible. That same snare, I found out later, I got to do some recording sessions with Gene Chrisman, who was part of the Memphis Boys in Memphis that played on those really great Elvis recordings in '69 at the American Sound Studio. And I asked Gene, I said, Gene, what snare drum was you playing on Suspicious Minds and Kentucky Rain and a bunch of stuff they cut in there for Chip's Moment.
Sure.
Reggie Young was the guitar player. I said, what was it? He said it was a Rogers Dynasonic.
How about that?
I said, Gene, I still have my Rogers Dynasonic snare. He says, well, he said, I played it on everything. He said, that's what you're hearing on all that stuff.
Oh, wow.
And he played on a lot of hit songs, and I found out later. I said, do you still have that drum? He said, well, I gave it to this drummer, Eddie Anderson. He has it and keeps it as a keepsake. Yeah. But he wanted to see mine at some point, and I can't remember if I ever took it up there and showed it to Gene. But it was a very popular drum, and if people still have theirs, it's considered quite an antique, a vintage piece, for drummers. Well, it's not like guitars, you know.
I diverted you from the pepper plant story, and I'm sorry about that, but I want to go back to that because you were still very young.
Yeah, we were playing, and we played this really neat talent show at what is now known as the old Kaufman. It was still the high school, played that gymatorium thing. Well, the host of that show was Ralph Emery. Way before he did his TV shows, he was the big guy on radio, and that WSM radio. He did the midnight show.
So he was here at the old high school.
He was here, and I have a picture of that, of us on stage, and he's handing us a trophy. And I posted it on Facebook a few times. And my dad, being like he is, thinking, he said, you guys need to dress alike this night. That we do this, because he got it from the quartet men,
Right.
So he saw that we were all in suits alike, dressed in suits. And in that picture, you can see us standing there on stage, and Mike Yerby's accepting now we're just kids. I mean, I'm 10 or 11.
Okay.
Since 68, so I was 11 years old.
Oh, wow.
Getting our trophy. And we only came in second place to another group here that was so much better than us, really.
Yeah.
But anyway, we were a country band that played a little bit of everything. We'd done some current rock and roll stuff back then.
Well, my mind's racing. I'm like, okay. So how did Ralph Emery end up doing a talent show or contest down here?
Somebody here had, hired him to come down. It was a big thing. I mean, there was a crowd of people there.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And there were different categories,
Okay.
In fact, Jackie and Ricky Weathers won in their young category, playing bluegrass.
Oh,
now, they
okay.
got first place. They were different trophies, different things.
Oh, okay.
Now, Ralph was not one of the judges. Somebody asked me that. I said, no, he was just the host of the show. I don't remember him judging. Yeah. I don't know who the judges were. I don't remember.
Okay.
But I just remembered Dad thinking, and then years later, I tie this to the Beatles, because when Brian Epstein was managing the Beatles, and they came here in '64. They were wearing leather with their hair slicked back in grease.
Right.
And it was his whole idea. He said, if you're going to go over to America, if they're going to accept you, you need to dress. So he dressed them alike in Pierre Cardin black suits, black ties.
Yeah.
He said, and let your hair go dry. Now, their hair was long for us, for that standard in 1964.
Right.
But he was the mastermind behind that. which it worked.
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of our parents accepted them a little bit better
Yeah.
on TV when they came on Ed Sullivan because of the way they were dressed alike. And he
Yeah.
even taught them that Beatles bow that they would do together.
Oh, yeah. They bowed. Yeah.
They rehearsed that. One
The
of the
Ed
guys,
Sullivan Show.
Yeah, it's like Paul McCartney would snap his finger, and they bowed together and came back up together. It was a cool thing, you know.
So your folks were kind of in tune to that, and so you're there
Yeah.
on the, and your dad decides y'all got to dress alike.
Yeah, but
That's interesting.
Dad came
interesting.
from
The gospel music.
It
deal.
was the quartet thing that
Right.
he was thinking. Because that looked good, and he thought and we were the best dressed thing there. I'll have to say,
Well, good
because
for
there's
you.
pictures of everybody on there.
Yeah.
So I'll have to say that didn't hurt. You know,
It
you
Didn't
got to
hurt.
be able to play a little music, but it doesn't hurt you to look good too.
No,
you know?
don't hurt. Don't hurt at all. Don't hurt at all. So
No.
so you end up with second place. Ralph Emery's
Probably,
hosting.
yeah.
So then what happened?
Well, I started performing quite a bit with professional gospel groups. So it got to where I couldn't work here in town and be here every Saturday to play with the volunteers like I did. And I think that there was a drummer that subbed for
how
me.
did that come about though? Because I mean, there wasn't like professional gospel groups lined up on Lawrenceburg's
No,
corner.
there wouldn't.
So how did that come about?
Well, it's a neat. I'm glad you asked, and because you've got a story that ties with this that I want you to tell. Of course, I'm rehearsing with all the gospel groups' records.
Yes.
So Labor Day, 1967. This would have been before I did that. I'm still playing around here in Lawrenceburg with the volunteers. We go down to what is now called the Renaissance Antique Store in Florence, there on your right as you cross over, after you cross the Shoal Creek Bridge. And recently in March, it got blown away in that big storm.
Okay.
It is just leveled.
Okay.
It's not there. It was a furniture store in the 60s. And
Okay.
this little man on Labor Day would have a watermelon cutting, as we called it.
Okay.
Hundreds of people would come from all over the country, and he would hire Wendy Bagwell and the Sunlighters from Atlanta, Georgia, to perform, and they were a big deal.
They
in
were a
gospel
big
music.
deal.
By then they had already worked Carnegie Hall.
Yeah.
They had been to Spain, all over Europe, Germany, toured all over Europe, come back over here, and this was before he had the rattlesnake story. They were just great gospel and real entertaining and very flashy in their dress.
Yes.
As you know, and we go down there. Take my snare drum down there, and she asked Wendy back. My mother asked her, said, "My son knows all your songs. Would you allow him to set in with you with his drum, his snare drum?" And we're out there on a big truck bed. It's hot, Labor Day, I'm dressed in a suit and tie, and they're dressed up.
Yeah.
And he said, well, she told him our names, and he said, well, have him set up his drum here at the end of the trailer, and we'll see how he does.
Yeah.
And man, they're doing a set every hour or so, all day long, you know. So he saw that I knew their stuff, their songs. They would just cut into the next song, and I would go, oh, I remember that one. So I'd know the rhythm pattern and play.
Right.
And I'm just playing brushwork on it,
Yeah.
And so that's how that got started, and I started setting in with them within 100 or 200 miles. If they would come perform anywhere, I would go set in with them. Then my dad started getting into the promotion business in this area, and he promoted them. If you saw them anywhere in the Lawrenceburg area, which you did, my dad promoted that show, that gospel show. And he would do, and so I got to play more. See, if they were there.
Yeah. Well, that
Tell
leads me
new prospects.
that leads me to the story of them, Wendy Bagwell and what were they? Wendy Bagwell
And the Sunlighters.
and the Sunlighters came to New Prospect School gymnasium.
Sure did. Yeah.
And we all went. We went there. And I remember thinking, how in the world does James Gordon Freeze, because he introduced you as a local guy, and I remember thinking, I was sitting on front row, I'm talking about front row, to see Wendy Bagwell, and I totally fell in love with one of the girls.
Oh, little Jan.
Because I was in elementary school. So I wasn't too focused on you, really.
No, I wouldn't be either. She was beautiful.
Yeah, but at that point, I think, then came the snakes and all that stuff
that came up.
Because
long.
They were very entertaining, and I remember. But I said earlier that was my earlier memory of you. But my earliest memory of you, seeing you, I guess, would have been right there.
Yeah.
And seeing you playing the drums. And best I remember was just a snare, probably.
Yeah, it probably was at that time.
Yeah,
and then later on, I started bringing the whole set.
They were set up in the gym, and gosh, it was just one of the biggest deals for me to be there.
Oh.
And sitting right on the front row, and of course, I'm pretty sure, what was her name? The girl that was
Little Jan.
Little Jan, whatever her name was, Little Jan.
She was a cousin to Wendy.
So she paid me just enough attention that I felt like she felt the same way about me that I did about her.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
Because I was sitting right on the front row.
What great entertainers they were.
Anyway, but there you were with Wendy Bagwell and the Sunlighters. And so that's how you got started.
How I got started
in this.
Yeah, and then later on, I would go to Nashville to the War Memorial Auditorium. They'd have every first Friday night of the month. They had a big package concert. They'd be the Oak Ridge Boys there. They were gospel singers.
Yeah.
Seagull Brothers, Naomi, people like that.
One of the things that I think is interesting about your story, James, and you know this without me telling you at all, because it's part of your story and you're telling it yourself. But how involved your mom and dad were in setting your path.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it's unreal.
Yeah, it
really
is. Yeah, I couldn't have done any of this without them.
They just set you a sail, bud.
Yeah.
And seen that you had what you needed, and seen that you were where you need to be.
That's right.
And talk to who you need to talk to. It was just pretty amazing.
And how to act. I got in trouble one night for taking my coat off on stage.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, you don't do that now.
You don't do that.
No, Dad got on. I thought I was going to get the, go to the woodshed on that one. But I learned you don't chew gum either on stage. Playing drums, chewing gum, that looked bad. I he knew that kind of stuff.
Right,
now, he couldn't tell me what to play, but he knew how. And he would be sure to remind me of that too. I know how you should be looking
on
stage.
One of the things I have to ask you about your dad is he had jet black hair.
Yeah, he sure did. Yeah,
and that was a signature mark.
Absolutely.
Of Mr. Freeze. Yeah. So what started that?
He actually, I saw some pictures of him when he was young. He looked like me, but I had blonde hair when I was growing up.
Yeah.
And he was a white-headed boy when he was little, and he turned as he got older. He turned black, and he had natural black hair for years. Then it went into him coloring his hair black, and he kept it that way for a long time.
Right.
And until about the time Donna and I got married, we talked him out of that, and he always had a head of hair, and it went to white,
Yeah.
But so we would go places, and he looked like a singer. Yeah. So we could go to Nashville, and he could walk in backstage. And they said, well, good. Yeah, they'd say, well, we're good to see you here tonight. The guards backstage at the War Memorial at the Municipal Auditorium, they just let him walk in. They thought he was one of the singers. And he wasn't. He was friends to a lot of them, some of the statesmen and different ones. He talked to them. And a lot of those guys, believe it or not, were all in the Masonic Lodge like he was, and he was big in that.
Yeah.
And so, especially the Statesman Quartet. So they could, talk the talk, and he'd hang out with them. Well, everybody backstage just figured, that guy there's one of the singers.
Yeah.
But he never did go on stage to sing. Yeah. I just walk in with him, with my drum, and now here I am to play for two or three groups.
That's kind of the perfect thing. You had an instrument, and he looked the part. So y'all must be part of the band somewhere.
Got to be. Nobody's stopping us at the stage door. We're just walking on in.
That's
and I figured that out real quick. I said, Dad, these folks must think you're in one of the quartets. He just laughed about it, and we'd walk right on in. You know?
That's amazing. Really.
But he would have tickets to the show
Sure.
out front.
Sure.
But I was there, and I would play for one group, the Windy Bagwell and the Sunlighters, and then next thing I know, I've got other groups and quartets asking me to play for them. So
Yeah.
just stay up here and play for us too.
Yeah.
And that's how it all happened.
Let's see if someone wants to talk to us here. Hey, good morning. You're on with us.
Yeah, James Gorden. The first time I remember seeing you was with Naomi and the Seagulls. You know, they had a weekly program back then, and James Seagull really was really high on you, and that was that the first group you? Well, you mentioned, of course, the Sunlighters. Was the Seagulls the second one you were with on a regular basis?
The Seagulls actually hired me to tour with them. So I never actually toured with Windy Bagwell and Sunlight. I'd just go and play all over the country when I could. But James Seagull asked my dad, could I go on the road with him?
Yeah.
He saw an opportunity there. And yes, that was in 1969. And I went on the road and toured and saw the country.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
How long were you with the Seagulls?
That time I was with them for 2 different summers when I was out of school. But that first year in 69, the Lord blessed me because we had a strike here. And the teachers had strike.
Okay.
And I stayed on the road till October. We didn't go back to school till after October, and we had to make that up. So I just stayed out there. And I'd call home and ask my folks, is the strike still going on? Yeah. They say, well, just stay out there. And I'd stay out another week with the Seagulls and just kept trying. I was doing a TV show with them at that time, too, in Nashville.
Oh, awesome. Hey, man, thanks for the call.
Yeah, thank you. Good to talk to you, James Gorden.
Good to talk to you, too.
All right. Very good. And by the way, the phone number here, 931-766-9393, if you want to talk to James Waller. We got him on the air.
That's cool.
Pretty cool, isn't it? But, yeah, so you did all that, and then you hooked up with the
Seagull brothers.
Seagull brothers and Naomi.
So we're doing this TV show, and it was being filmed at Channel 5 in the basement where they were doing Hee Haw at the same time.
Okay.
And Hee Haw was a network show. It was not syndicated. It was on CBS network.
Okay.
But they didn't have their own studio yet, so they were doing it down there. So we're using part of their set to do our show, the Seagull Brothers, and it was syndicated.
Okay.
And we were on Sunday mornings, and it was syndicated all through the South. And it was, I'll never forget, it was sponsored by Magiderm, and Magiderm was
what in the world?
Okay, it was an ointment, and James Seagull would hold up this little jar of Magiderm, and it was for acne and stuff
really?
like that. It was an ointment to use. Oh yeah, that was. I'll never forget that because he'd do Magiderm, and he had this real gravelly voice, you know. It was real funny. So one time, and of course, Dad, we'd have to get up really early, and Jimmy Benefield, that was my barber back then. You know, he got killed in a motorcycle wreck. Crushed. Jimmy up here, what was it called? Cross corner up here. Anyway, would fix my hair that morning early.
Yeah.
And we'd be up there to do TV. And so Dad took me. He'd get off from work from H.G. Hills to take me that day. Well, one day a scout from the Musicians Union was there.
Yes.
And he's standing next to my dad. He figures out real quick, this must be his kid up here playing drums.
Right.
So
right.
he says, excuse me, he said, but is that your boy up there playing drums? And he said, well, yes, sir, it is. He says, well, now I'm a scout from the Musicians Union, the local here.
Okay.
Said, and he, I assume, is not a member of our union. He said, well, he's not a member of any musicians union.
Yeah.
No. He, and he says, well, he's knocking out a union player today, would be playing in that spot. He said, I tell you what you do, Mr. Eddie Crook, who's playing piano there, is in our union and is very active. Said, you bring your boy and Mr. Crook with you tomorrow, and we'll sign him up. down at the hall.
Okay.
And Eddie took us down there. And I've been a member of the Musicians Union since 1969. And Jimmy Capps, from when he was still living at the Opry, told me one time, I got my 25-year pin, and I got my 50-year pin. Now I'm a life member.
Oh, wow.
And so Cap said one day, he said, "You got to be the youngest guy that ever joined the union." I said, "Well, I've never looked into it." He said, "Well, you need to look into that." He said, "How many 12-year-olds?" I do know Marty Stewart joined at 13 when he joined the Flat, Lester Flat.
He started early, too.
Yeah. And he had to join the union quick to play on the Grand Ole Opry and stuff. That's a big deal. And so that has been a blessing, whether you're a union person or not. But that's a blessing because most musicians don't end up with anything at the end of their term or whatever you want to call it. And I never appreciated none of that all those years, but we kept my dues up. There's a funeral benefit in it and all this kind of thing. All these years later, and I realized, that's another thing my dad had the insight to go ahead. He could have said, no, or fluffed that guy off or whatever and said, but no, he thought this would be good for him.
Yeah. Pretty amazing.
Yeah. Now, here's a good story. We go to Bonifay, Florida, first or second or third week in that summer with the Seagulls, 69. And Dad went with me to help me for one tour.
Okay.
And then I was fine from there on because Miss Naomi Seagull could take care of me. And so he had the forethought to go to Nashville. We went down here to Mr. Harry Willis, had a picture made of me with my drums stacked up next to me.
Yeah.
He takes it to Nashville.
I think I may have seen that.
You've seen it.
I've seen it.
And he went to Star Photo, where all the stars went. It's called Star Photo, and had 1,000 of them made.
Okay.
They came in wrapped in a big package, And I said, "Dad, what is that?" He said, "Never mind." I said, "We get down here to Bonifay, you'll find out." So we get down there, and he unpacks it, and I realize it's these pictures. It's these 8 by 10 glossy pictures. And James Seago, during his pitch of the material that night, said, "Now our little drummer back here, the 12-year-old drummer's got a picture here." And I forget what we sold him for, 50 cents, I guess.
Okay.
I don't remember. We sold all 1,000. There was 13,000 people there that night. We sold all 1,000 of those quick as I could hand Daddy the money, and he's putting it in his pocket, and I'm signing them. We get back to Lawrenceburg. He goes to Commerce Union Bank and opens my savings account with that money.
Well, I be dog. That's unbelievable,
So I
buddy.
wanted you to know that little story.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
That's a great story.
Yeah. Bonifay, Florida was the largest outdoor all-night gospel singing in the South. And when you go through Bonifay to go to Panama City, there's still a big sign next to that high school stadium stating that is the largest gospel sing of all time in history.
Really?
Yeah, and it was back then.
Back then? Wow. How about that? Well, you know what's funny? So, I was talking about your mom and dad just setting you on your path, but they also kind of marketed you.
Yeah,
they marketed
now,
you.
Dad was good at that kind of thing.
He kind of marketed you to.
And that was a freeze trade. His uncles were cool like that. I mean, they're and I know one of my cousins is listening today from down in Texas, and her dad was my Uncle Bruce.
Yeah,
and Uncle Bruce could have done his own TV show. He's one of the funniest men you've ever been around in your life. Just had a natural talent for being funny, just telling a story, and you run across people like that every once in a while. Oh, he's such a character. And I love characters. We've talked about this. I absolutely love characters.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, gosh, we've still got several minutes that we can go on, and we're not even close to your whole story.
No, I got a text yesterday, and I forget who sent it. Said, is there going to be a sequel to this?
Well, they probably will.
I figure you're not going to be able to tell your old story. I said, well, that'll be up to Jeff.
So how long? So you were with the Seagull and Naomi?
Yeah, for a couple of years.
For a couple of years. What happened after that?
Well, I taught their son, and that was the ultimate thing. Their son who was 2 years older than me. And through watching me and me helping him, I taught him to play.
Okay.
And he became one of the greatest drummers I ever worked with. See,
Okay.
I went back with him 2 more times playing other instruments.
Okay.
And with him on drums.
Well, see, we hadn't talked
Seega.
about that. You
Yeah.
drummed, but then you learned to. You
Taught
did learn.
myself played bass, and I was already playing some piano
You was
too.
playing some piano,
Yeah,
and all that kind
yeah.
of stuff. So so you're multi-talented. You play guitar.
Don't play guitar,
Well,
believe it or not.
you can strum it.
But my thing went from the bass as connected to the drums kind of thing,
Yeah.
and which has been a good thing for me too,
Yeah. All right.
in session stuff. And
So you transitioned from a drummer to a bass player.
yeah.
And how did
I
that
was
happen?
about 15 or 16. I was watching bass players and realized I could do that.
Okay.
And just picked up and once again, Dad bought me a nice Fender bass from Stan Methvin that you know
Yeah.
here in town.
Yeah.
Stan would, and I kept that bass till the truss rod broke in it, and I had to let that bass go. And it was a nice precision Fender, pre-CBS, in fact.
Fender
63. I wish I still had that bass, but
Oh,
I
I'm
needed
sure.
a working bass, so I got a new Music Man in 1978, and I still have that bass. And it got kind of famous in the gospel field because a lot of the guys played the Music Man basses. That's what Leo Fender started building, you
Well,
know.
before you leave the studios today, after the show's over, I want to show you one that's here in this.
Oh, cool.
I
Yeah.
want to show you one that's here.
You know, I love that.
You need to see it.
I love the instruments.
So anyway.
yeah, I definitely want to see that.
Oh,
But,
wow. So you started playing bass,
yeah.
and what were your first gigs with the bass? As far as playing or something.
I started playing bass with a group called a very popular gospel group who helped kind of pioneer the contemporary Christian thing in the late 70s, and they were called the Downings.
I remember them.
Yeah, and I was in the last band with them. Mike Allen was a drummer, and we worked with them and worked some shows and opened for Don Francisco's and somebody did He's Alive and all that.
Oh, yeah.
And we did a lot of things up north with them, did a lot of big college dates. But they were wanting to transition like the Oak Ridge Boys had transitioned into country. They were wanting to transition into some sort of a Vegas act or but with message music.
Yes.
As a Christian type thing. And we did audition for 20th Century Fox for their record label.
Okay.
But we were just the Southern gospel overtones were still in there.
Yeah.
With some of the singers, and I think it kept that from happening. Now the Downings did go out to Vegas and back up Jimmy Dean on some shows, and that's kind of what got that started.
Okay.
And so
That's interesting.
It was interesting, and we did audition. They came from the team came here. I'll never forget it, and we actually done a lot of James Taylor kind of stuff that that would kind of cross over from gospel to message type things.
Right.
And but it just didn't work, and as a result, the group fell from it financially.
Yeah.
And we just lost everything. I mean, they got the bus and
Oh, wow.
padlocked our big building that we rehearsed in. Now, you talking about learning. That gig required you to rehearse from 9 to 5 daily. 5 days, whether you were working gigs out on the road or not. You went up there to Hendersonville, and we rehearsed every day. We had to be at 9 o'clock. And that made a better bass player out of me.
Okay.
Even though the gig didn't turn out to be what I thought it was going to be. I dropped out of college to do that gig at
That brings up
MTSU.
another point. The work ethic behind doing it is more than maybe you think.
Right.
It looks fun to go play music, but you had to work at it.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's an example of that.
Yeah, and it was tough. And I learned more about reading the number system, which I teach now a lot to people. And
Which I want to learn, by the way.
Oh, it's the only way to do. And I've taught so many guitar players. And as I say, I'm not a guitar player, but I know I taught Kevin Gallion here. I taught Sam Roy, and then so they could get gigs.
But the
'cause
number
they could,
system.
yeah, they said,
If people that don't know, the Nashville number system is what he's talking about.
method of reading a chord chart.
Yeah.
And you can't get a gig in Nashville without that, knowing that, having knowledge of that or knowing that. And I remember Andy White and I learning of that and writing each other because we didn't have computers. So we were sending this back and forth through mail.
Okay.
You know, and Andy says, hey, I'm catching on to this number system thing. And I said, well, yeah, I am too. And so he and I kind of learned it together in the 70s when we were playing music together.
Okay.
And I was still playing some weekends, you know, with those guys, you know, with Andy and those guys too on the weekends. I mean, I was just in there. I had a lot of irons in the fire. If I could play for somebody, I'd go and play for them.
Well, we only have about 5 minutes left, and
Oh,
I
my
hate it.
goodness.
We're going to have to.
We'll have to continue.
We'll do a continuation to this. I promise we will later on. But I did want to get to how it came to be because your career took off with Bill Anderson.
Yeah.
And when did that happen?
That happened in 91, February of 1991. A good friend of mine used to work for Bill, Dirk Johnson, who's a session guitar, pianist in Nashville. And a record producer. He produces Gene Watson and different people like that. And gospel, too, like I do, gospel records and things. And he plays on a lot of my sessions. And so Dirk called me up, and I had the Hemp Hills that I was working with had come off the road. I did a year with a group called the Nealons from Atlanta. And in exactly 1 year I did that. And then I got a call from Dirk that Bill Anderson's bass player was going to go to work for Aaron Tippin.
Okay.
He said,
said,
you've got this gig if you want it. All you got to do is walk in. You don't have to audition. I've told him about it. I told Mike Johnson was steel guitar and the band leader.
Yeah.
All you got to do is just walk in and do the gig. And that's how it happened. And I went up there and they handed me a packet full of charts and tapes and said, woodshed this stuff, and we're headed to Atlanta here in a couple of weeks to do our first gig down there.
Now, what does woodshed mean?
That means work hard. You know what I mean? I mean, I worked hard, hours and hours, because I had become a singer too, bass player and singer, which I always wanted to do. You know,
That's so cool.
I've been singing for years, but that really, Bill's the guy who gave me my singing thing. You know, so
you started with Bill Anderson and still with Bill.
I'm still there, almost 33 years.
33 years, and Bill Anderson's still going strong.
Still going.
That's amazing.
It is amazing.
And of course, you've been on the Grand Ole Opry countless times with him, and I guess others as well. Different times and places. But you know, it's something that I've told you about, and I'm going to hold your feet to the fire with it. I've never got to go to the Grand Ole Opry.
Well, you're going.
So I've never got to go.
You've got to go.
We've got to go, and I'll try to record something with somebody to bring back here.
You need to.
When we do
Yeah.
that.
Oh,
When we do
yeah.
that.
That'd be great.
Almighty. That's a good deal. James Gordon Freeze has been our guest today, and of course we've still got a little bit of time, not a lot. But what's on the horizon for James Gordon?
Well, now
Freeze?
I would like to say that Saturday night, if y'all tune in, of course it's a different radio station, but tune us in, and we're on. If you have XM radio, you know the Grand Ole Opry is live on Willie's Roadhouse.
That's right. That's right.
And so if you'll tune us in, this Saturday night we're celebrating the 98th birthday of the Grand Ole Opry.
Awesome.
98 years of the
that's
Grand
the
Ole
Saturday
Opry.
I want to go.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I wish I'd have known time to get you on the list. But that will be Saturday night. There'll be two shows that night. And I can't tell you, I know Sarah Evans is there, but there'll be countless, no telling who else will be there.
That's amazing.
In the show. But that's this coming
And
Saturday
you'll be
night.
up there?
Yeah.
And Bill will be there, I'm sure?
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. Good. That is so great. James Gordon Freeze, everybody. And man,
what
thank
a good
you.
time.
Thank you, brother, for
Well,
being
thank
in here.
you for having
Being
me.
here
I've
with me.
enjoyed it
It's
so
been
much.
awesome. We're going to do it again.
All right.
We're going to do it again. Hey, tune in tomorrow, everybody, for the Wake Up Show. We'll be back in the morning, good Lord willing, and I'm going to have James Gordon back again. God bless, old buddy.
God bless you, sir.
All right, see you later.
All righty.
I want to see if I can turn this volume up here on the news break is next. So stick around for all that. And James Gordon Freeze again, everybody. And tune in Saturday.
Yeah.
Saturday for the
98th birthday.
Yeah, 98th birthday. I don't know what it's supposed to kick off right now. I guess I'm waiting on it, but Fox News is coming up here, the news break on all that. But in the morning, we'll start all over. Start all over the wake up show.
Again.
All that. So Stick around, everybody.
All
I
right.
don't know why that's not going, but I'm going to have to kick it off.
This is
There you go.
WDXE,
I got it.
W287AA and W237FD Lawrenceburg. Broadcast services of Prospect Communications.
The House is in recess till next week.